So hey everyone, thanks for coming by. This talk is on targeting Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 in Unity. My name's Jodon. I'm Jodon Karlik from Coding Jar Studios. Coding Jar Studios is just a two-man team. It's myself. I'm kind of the tech side, and then I have a partner, Doug, who's an artist, who's over there in the audience. What we do is mostly we've made a game called Fling Theory. So Fling Theory was, or is a game that sort of takes the complex topic of atomic physics and we try to simplify it and make it fun and kind of accessible to kids to try to encourage, some learning of science and things like that. So in our game, you play as electrons, and what you do is you try to bend around atoms of different charges. So, a negative electron and a positive atom. So you'll attract, as we will in this example. And then negative and negative will repel, and positive will repel. So that's kind of like how our game was designed and made. And the thing that's important about our game is that it was one of the first ones to target both Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. And we're kind of like one of the first, I think, 3 or something to launch on Windows Phone 8. And I don't know, I forget what number we were on Windows 8. But we're kind of like leading the charge for that sort of thing. So we've hit basically any roadblock you can imagine trying to do it. And we've written a bunch of posts and presentations on how to solve those issues, and I just wanted to share a bunch with you today. So if you're targeting Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8, you've come to the right place. The other thing we're kind of known for is we do interactive tutorials. So on the asset store, you can find some interactive tutorials, which is, if you're super new to Unity, basically it's like you're inside the editor, we'll tell you how to do stuff, and then we can detect that you've done it and then continue on. So that's kind of cool, and people kind of like us for that. So I just thought I'd mention it. And the last thing I want to mention is that we have a blog up at codingjar.com/blog, and on there I actually have a project that I'm going to be showing later on in this presentation. And in that project, I basically have a bunch of code that'll solve a bunch of issues for you, and then show examples of issues you'll run into and how to solve them. So I've done all my presentation in my game here, so I'm just going to show you how you play it here. And that's just positive and negative attracting. So the first thing I want to mention, some release and dev business tips. So basically, if you're new to the Windows 8 platform, there's some things that are different, and I kind of wanted to mention them all, especially if you're like an independent developer. If you're new, these tips should really help you out. So the first one I wanted to mention is BizSpark. So there's this initiative by Microsoft called BizSpark. If you're a new startup within the last 3 years, you can sign up for this. It's totally free. You can get every Microsoft product for free for those next 3 years or something like that. So essentially, it's like your membership to Windows Phone and Windows 8, Visual Studio, Windows itself, all free. And so if you're a new startup, small business, definitely something you should look into. The second thing I want to mention is App Campus. So in App Campus, what they'll do is they'll fund promising new games to make them Windows Phone 8 exclusives for 3 months only. So that's what Fling Theory did. So on Fling Theory, we were targeting other platforms. We submitted to App Campus. They really liked our game, and we decided, OK, let's do App Campus. So they flew us to Finland. We did the training. We got all the funding, and it was a really, really positive experience. You should look into it if you're an independent developer, or if you've released some products and are looking for a bit of funding on your next one. Definitely look into App Campus. There's also something called Develop, like develop, obviously. But that's the Nokia initiative, where you sign up and you earn points based on products you release and dev things you do. And basically, you accumulate these points, and you can redeem them for stuff. One of the things you can redeem them for is like Starbucks cards, if you're interested in Starbucks, which I'm sure you are. But one of the things that you can do with those points is you can redeem them to be featured on the Windows Store or on the Nokia Store. And so that's really important. And it doesn't take that many points to do it. Essentially, I think we're there with our single release of Fling Theory. So Fling Theory, it got rated well. We got a lot of downloads. We implemented a lot of Windows-specific features. One of the things, we have extended splash screens. We have in-app purchases. We have all these different features that they're looking for. And when you do that, you earn points. And so basically, we could redeem those points at any time to be featured on the store, which is really cool. Also, there's on the Windows platform, there's technical evangelists, which are basically people in your area who know a lot about Microsoft stuff or connected to Microsoft and can really help you out. So one of the things early on in the year, we went to a game jam in Vancouver and got connected to some evangelists there who saw our game. Those evangelists did a lot for us. They could basically solve some of the tech issues you're running into, some of the more complex problems. You have a direct line into Microsoft. And so that really helped us out. And of course, they were always looking at our product. And when they saw that we released it, they kind of pushed it into their channels, and we kind of got some press on it and got featured by them, which is really cool. And actually, those evangelists, those are the same ones at the Microsoft booth here today. So you should definitely go by, check them out. On the dev side, there's a couple things that really worked for us. One of them was Add Duplex. So that's an exchange network that's specific to Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. On that ad network, basically it's like you're exchanging ads on there, but they also have really cool, and that exchange really works for us. That's still kind of keeping our downloads up. But one of the things that they have on there on the business side is they have statistics for which devices are currently having a lot of downloads, first of all, and using their product. So since Add Duplex is integrated into a lot of Windows Phone applications, you can basically go to their site and see what devices do people have, what should I be targeting, what countries should I be targeting. They share all those stats with you, which is really cool. And the guy who runs it's also pretty cool. The other thing we did was we used a site called Preapps. That's basically your test flight, but for Windows. So basically, you go on there, you can pitch your app, you show it up, you have your little storefront there, and then people are like, I want to test that app. And that's how you kind of recruit testers on the Windows Phone side. And then to couple with that, you have your beta store, which is you can release your product as if it was on the Windows Store, but it's only available to people whose email addresses you've put in. So you can test your exact in-app purchase flow as if it was live, but only available to you. And of course, when you do that, everything's free. So I'm just going to go on to my next slide. So onto the actual development part of this. So one of the first things you should know is that there's kind of two different pipelines for doing Windows development. One is Windows Phone, and one is Windows 8. So on Windows Phone, they still use the Mono compiler. So that's the same one that's used inside Unity. So most of your stuff still works kind of the same way. There's some stuff that has been removed. So some stuff, like the network functionality, just doesn't work yet on Windows Phone. So if you have code like that, you might have to remove it. Again, that's the internal Unity network stuff, so you might not be using that, so it's not such a big issue. There's a couple other things that you might have to massage or remove, some different implementations, but I have an example of that later on. The last thing you should know about that is that eventually, once you've done everything, it'll get serialization, what's called serialization weaved. So you create your DLL, and then they do a bunch of magic to your DLL. Once that magic happens, it's converted it over into Windows Phone friendly format, and that might have some kind of issues if you're using plugins or if you're writing your own plugins. You kind of have to be aware of it, just the fact that this is happening. And you can do it yourself manually, and in my example project, I kind of I run the command line myself so that your compilation in Visual Studio matches exactly what Unity outputs, and you can iterate really, really quickly doing that. So on the Windows 8 side, it's a bit different. So the first thing you got to do is you're using the Microsoft.NET compiler, and that's Unity's using it yourself. So when you do the actual compilation step, that's what's happening. Then the first thing you're going to run into is you're going to get bit by your API changes here. So that's representing the first obstacle you're going to have to kind of overcome. So what's going to happen is it's going to spit out a bunch of things saying, oh, I don't know about hash table. I don't know about your SHA1 implementation. And you can deal with that stuff. And then what will happen is your stuff will get serialization weaved yet again. So your DLLs and all your plugins and stuff are going to go through this thing, which may or may not fail, depending on how they were written. And then the final thing, the thing that might bite you in the end, that last little lightning strike there, that's what I call WAX. So it's a Windows Application Certification Kit. And what'll happen is every application that goes to the Windows Store has to pass this WAC test. And if you go straight forward into into porting your game into Windows 8, you won't know for sure if you're going to pass WAC or not unless you've written all the code yourself. So if you have a plugin, you won't know if that plugin passes WAC until you're done. And I'm going to show you how to get around that. So I'm just going to go over a quick strategy for porting to Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. So the first one I would recommend is Windows 8, or Windows Phone 8, sorry, is a lot easier. So there's very few obstacles in Windows Phone 8 development. Essentially, what'll happen is you'll get some compilation errors, and as soon as you remove those compilation errors, a lot of them are, again, network access. They've actually fixed up hash table and a lot of the ones for you. So what happens is when you compile, Unity fixes up some of the old code and converts it to newer code. So you don't get as many issues, and they're very much apparent. There's some things that will mess up at runtime, but not very many. And you'll get an exception at runtime when you test your game. Usually, in a game like Fling Theory, we've had 0. I have this nightmare project where we had 1. So they're pretty few and far between. However, on Windows 8, you can go through this process of trying to compile, trying to get it to work, it telling you you're missing libraries, and you're trying to pass, you're trying to just get your project to compile, and you could end up going in circles, fixing something, then another thing breaks, and it's kind of sucks for doing that right away. So I'm going to show you how to know if you're going to pass or not. So the better strategy for doing Windows 8 is to not use NetFX Core when you're starting out. So there's a trick that you can do in Unity, and I'm going to show you where that is really soon. Actually, I'll show it to you now. Why not? So these are all your Windows Store apps overrides. If you switch this thing over to none instead of NetFX Core, your project is basically guaranteed to compile. It's guaranteed to compile and not pass Windows Store certification. That's basically what that flag is doing. So that's using the old version of .NET, the one that's supported by Unity. So that's kind of your shortcut to getting a Visual Studio project out. So what you want to do is you want to do that first. So you do that first, and you bypass the WAC. Then what you do is you run, or sorry, not WAC, but the Microsoft compiler and missing libraries. Then what you do is you run the WAC. So in Visual Studio, you'll have this option of hey, I want to create a package. I want to use Windows Application Certification Kit. And it'll tell you where you fail. And you'll know right away, hey, am I failing in my plugins or am I failing in my own code? If you're failing in your own code, you're golden. All you have to do is fix it up. If you're failing in your plugins, what you can do is you can see if there's a new version of your plugin. You can see if there's source code available for that plugin, or you have to contact your plugin provider. So after you've passed, or you can pass, then you go back and you fix up your code. You go back to Unity, you use NetFX, and you fix up your code. So what does it actually look like? Well, this is essentially my big, this is what I had to do to get everything working. So on both platforms, you basically have to nuke any network code you have. You can rewrite code if you want. If you're using a third-party plugin like Ulink or something, you just have to rewrite their code to use the new system networking libraries. System XML is renamed. It's kind of different. You have to rewrite that system. You can't really just rename it or anything like that. So reading XML files kind of doesn't work. You have to rewrite MD5. You can find open source code. It's just not available on the platform, but you can find, if you look for Silverlight MD5, that's basically MD5 written in C#. So you have to put that in your projects. SHA1, that's, they support it. It's just been renamed. You just have to go find that out. On both systems, avoid Boo the language. It sounds obvious, but actually one of the plugins I used in my Nightmare project was Rage Tools Pro, and I think they use Boo for their editor stuff, and it doesn't like that stuff, even on Windows Phone 8. Avoid system I/O file because the file systems have been rewritten, and Unity has a fix for that coming up. So by the time you're ready for this, probably you'll be using a different Windows I/O stuff. But for now, in 4.2, avoid a system I/O file, and most of that, a lot of people don't do it anyway. So kind of going around doing all these different things. What I wanted to say is I made this Nightmare project. And so what I would consider a Nightmare project. In the Nightmare project, what I did is I grabbed pretty much every plugin I own and put it all together in a project, try to compile it for Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. And surprisingly, using those tricks by basically nuking code that I know is not going to work, like system.xml, which is usually not stuff you're using at runtime, using nuking network code, which I wasn't using in a typical project, you can get just about all those plugins to work. So Uscript is like a visual scripting language. I'm so surprised it actually just works on Windows Phone 8 if you just nuke the networking classes. RAID Spline works. Playmaker has their own plugin for Windows Phone 8, so you just buy that. Megafires, NGUI, iTween, these all essentially just work. The one thing you can't do on Windows 8 is you can't use JavaScript. So you have to convert your JavaScript code, if you have any, to C#. And there's tricks on doing that. One, you can find something on the web to do it for you. Or you can use a program called ILSpy, and what that does is it decompiles bytecode, and it'll give you that bytecode in C# language as if it was written there. Then you just copy and paste it in your project and fix it up just a bit. A typical one that people always run into is the JSON stuff. So people are using their own JSON libraries or ones they found off the net. So lit.json was one I had in my project. I just fixed it up. I fixed it up like I'm going to show you how to fix up normal code, and that just works on my project. Supposedly, I really like fast.json. That's one of my favorite libraries. I would just replace it with that or use json.net. That one is compatible with Windows Phone 8. So now I am going to switch over to the Windows Store example that I have on my blog. And we're going to go through some live code. By the way, is the pace OK? Am I going too fast, too slow? Am I good? Good? All right. So this is the code that I have on my blog. This is basically like a condensed Nightmare project that I had. So what I've done is I've taken typical issues that you'll run into, and then I threw it in this file. And this is just the output to show you that it's actually working. So you can test this in your Windows Store app or in your Windows Phone app and make sure that all the results are the same as you're expecting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compile this on Windows Phone Store app, yep. And so I'm going to compile this and show you that I get a bunch of errors. So these are the errors that I was kind of warning you about. It's like, hey, I can't find hash table. I can't find array list. Those are the main ones that I still have in the code and haven't fixed yet. So that's what you can expect when you're doing your project, when you're trying to export to Windows 8. You're going to get a bunch of I'm missing this library. I'm missing this. It's been renamed or something like that. So one of the things is I have a bunch of code available again on the blog that fixes this issue. And so I'm going to copy it over into my project, and I'm going to do this by just renaming it so that it actually compiles. The one thing you'll notice on this example is the standard assets are the ones that refuse to compile. So those are the ones that Unity themselves have done. And they'll fail to compile because they're using those unsupported libraries. But I had to throw this file inside the standard assets folder because Unity compiles those first. So you have to throw these fixes in some place that Unity will pick up before it tries to compile everything else. So that's just one gotcha to keep in mind when you're using this fix. So now, actually, sorry. I totally skipped a step. Sorry, I wanted to show you that even with these compilation errors, if I switch this over to none and then compile it, this is going to take a while, so I'm going to skip ahead. But if I do this, it's going to actually compile OK. And I want to show you what'll happen. So this thing's going to compile OK. I haven't fixed it yet. I actually undid those things. But when you run the Windows Application Certification Kit, this is what you're going to get. So you're going to get a bunch of failed unsupported APIs. So here, it's using hash table. It's using cryptography, SHA-1, all these different things. But you can fix them because the library that says they're in is the assembly that you're generating for Unity. So as long as you see this assembly like C#, which is the ones that you're writing code in, you're all golden. In contrast to that, I have the Nightmare project here, which I ran against whack. In contrast to that, you'll see this one here. I'm getting some failures, but they're in UScript, DLL. So that's the plugin I was using. So unfortunately, you'll know that if you run whack against this, you'll never pass it. So you'll know UScript doesn't pass it, so your project will never be able to pass it unless you get an update for UScript. So I'm going to go back here. So yeah, that's an unrelated error. So now I'm actually going to fix the code. I'm going to switch this back over to use NetFX, build and run, or at least build. And of course, this is going to take a while, so I'm going to skip ahead. Just know that it works and that you'll get this project. So one of the things I'm going to look at is what changes did I make to get that stuff to work? Like, why is that file somehow magical? And I will show you as soon as my thing stops compiling. Cancel. Sorry? Oh, yeah. I know, that's the thing. They had the cancel button implemented, right? OK. Well, actually, I can look at it in here, so I don't know why I'm going to do that. I can't. OK, sorry. So the one thing, when you look at this example at home or when you're ready to do your port, you'll see that I've commented everything, which is good, thank God, so that you can see sort of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So the first thing you'll notice is that I've re-implemented array lists using generic list of objects. And basically, for everything that's missing, everything that said it was missing, okay, basically I just implemented it like it used to be. So hey, we had 2Array, so I'm writing a 2Array thing. They don't have hash table down here, so I'm implementing hash table as a dictionary of objects to objects. And that's essentially how I fixed all those errors. You can read through the code. I'm kind of running late on time. So I wanted to do a couple things in this project here that I thought would be kind of important. So one of the ones is that when Unity gives you a project, they'll give you a project that has a bunch of partial classes in it. So these partial classes help you out because you can extend those classes without modifying the Unity code. So when you make your own Windows Store app, what you want to do is you want to make your own folder with your own extension methods in it, and you want to do your own initialization in there. And that way you can do everything without modifying the Unity code, so you'll never oh, I never want to nuke my project because I don't know what changes I made. Make sure all your changes are in your own files. In here, I've done a bunch of things that you need to do to get that won't fail whack, but will force you to not pass store certification. So one of them is you have to have a privacy policy if you use network at all. Another thing that I do is I make sure that this isn't needed to pass. Oh yeah, so to pass certification, you also, on Windows 8, you need an extended splash screen if you're going to release on Surface. So on the Surface device, what'll happen is your splash screen, or your thing will load up, you'll get a splash screen, it'll disappear, and then your screen will go blank for like 20 seconds. And you need to have what's called an extended splash screen, so it's like something's showing up, something's happening while that loading is happening. And it's just because Surface is a bit slower than the other devices, and so I've sort of done that on there. And I've done some goodies like, made sure that your stuff gets backed up to the cloud and loaded from the cloud. That's what that player prefs external thing does. And the last thing I want to talk about is fast iteration by loading all your Unity code inside your project. So there's something in the help file called the Metro Project Generator, and I fixed it up a bit on the code on my site so that it works a bit better. So what happens is all your Unity code in your project is available in Visual Studio. You can compile these DLLs, and that basically saves you from re-exporting your project. So instead of going through that build process where you're like, okay, build, okay, now I have to wait for the thing to export like I was just doing, you can actually just build it straight up in Visual Studio and iterate that way, have everything work really quickly. As long as you're not changing data, as long as you're not changing your levels or your prefabs, this is super fast and super a good way to go. And I was talking about the serialization weaver, and this is what's happening here. In the build events, in the post build, it's just running that serialization weaver on your project. If you're writing plugins, this is what you want to do. You want to put your plugin inside of your Visual Studio project so that the DLL is generated on the Visual Studio side. And then you want to do the serialization weaver on that so that they're all compatible. That's one of the steps, and I think Unity might be changing how that stuff works right now. But essentially, if you do it all on the Visual Studio side, you run into less issues. I think that's pretty much going to be my time. All right, so that's my time. If you have questions, come see me, or do we have time for questions? Nope, no time for questions. Sorry, guys. Yeah, come see me. Come to the lab. Yeah, if there's I'll be in the lab every now and again, and if there's really tough questions, then yeah, I'll be there. Cool, thanks, guys.